Today I'm gonna show you an app that looks like this. Pretty standard. So what we have is the event log, there is a role, switcher, sort of. There are different teams, and then the team can have members and so on, right? So what I would like to do, and then you can see the name of the organization, but because this is an organization on dashboard. And then when you click things, of course, it opens the window with the detail, but it also logs what the user did, right? And then you can also switch that the user can manage members, which is like I'm an admin. And here I can switch the role for the user, which will appear here as well. And then I can also remove the user, and that's going to appear here as well. So let's have a look how it can be implemented in a not so optimal way, and then I show you the refactorings that can happen. And all right, so let's have a look from top bottom. On the nutshell, it looks pretty okay actually. So you see, let's talk about the modules first. So we have like the app root module, and then you will have teams, you will have roles, orgs. Maybe I can show it to you on the README file. So the coupling is done this way. For whatever reason, it doesn't open. Okay, so you see, it's like this. So you have app that knows about the event logs because the component is used in the template. Then there is roles as well. This is this checkbox button. Then you have organizations, and then you also know about the teams inside the organization and then the members. And then there is some shared UI. So this is not optimal, but I want to show you that there are two ways of actually measuring the coupling. One is you can measure the coupling in ways like how many times I use that. So you can look in the app test on top in the import files, and then you say, oh, this is coupling one, this is coupling, it could be one or whatever. Actually, it is one, yeah, because I have only one import in one file, right? Even though I import two things, so we can say, okay, that could be two, right? Because I reference two things. But then when you look in many files, so it can go around in different ways, right? So the most naive way is to just say one file, one import, that's one, but more advanced one would be count the amount of entities that I reference here, and then count each one of those, right? So that's gonna go higher in numbers, but it's still not the most optimal way. And I will show you in a second. So this is also not super optimal, but on the first look, it looks pretty good actually. It looks pretty clean. I would like to spend some time on the shared UI part, so you can understand it. So when you go here, you can see there is a clear distinction between shared part of components and actual like feature components, right? Sorry, feature modules. So this is the shared module, and when you look into here you can see a clear separation. There is even ng content provided, so there is a lot of good stuff being done here. Like I've seen much worse code bases, right? But still there are huge couplings because this component is prop drilling. That's one of the first idea, right? So I have a team here, and then when I go inside the component like member lists. Sorry, okay, I just open it. When I go here, you see I'm receiving a member, right? And then when you come back to where I came from, a member is also, so I just drill down. So a team will have members, and then the members, as I see, I'm also receiving from the component, and I have to put it up because the main state is in the app component, and this is one of the biggest mistakes, but I'm going to talk about it just in a second. For now, I would like you to understand sort of a problem, right? So you go down on the team level, you can see, even though we have a nice layout component, we go down to the member needs to provide more information. So we see I receive member and I push in the member into the cart, and then inside this card, you see I'm receiving an input and I'm outputting what has changed. So this way of communicating is called prop drilling. So you go from top to bottom and from bottom to top, right? And yeah, I mean, there is like ng content used, but sometimes it's really, really hard to avoid it. But before we can go more in depth of how to solve it, I would like you to also ponder on this other idea. This other idea is, don't think about coupling as just increase of counts. This is super basic, but think about it like connection points, right? So let me give you an example. So you see, this is an HTML, and here I use a component. This is okay. I mean, this is, of course, coupling, but very little coupling. It's like I give it 0.1 weight. Why? Because adding and removing things in HTML is easy. Now, this is another connection point. This is actually a little bit more difficult because any input really, and of course, the more advanced the input, the difficult, the tighter coupling it is. But for now, I just keep it like for every input, I give 0.2. So of course you can like normalize this to a single input and you're gonna have like sort of like less coupling, but that's not the way because the more like the primitive types on the inputs are easier to manage because they are primitive, right? And more sophisticated models are more difficult to manage. It creates more coupling. I didn't add that to this sort of a review model, but it's actually a real thing. So the more inputs and the more complicated inputs, the bigger the coupling, and the more outputs and the more complicated the outputs, the more the coupling, because adding or removing anything in those models or adding or removing a input will cause problems. The ideal situation is I would like to be able to cut that part and move it somewhere. Let's just say here. I mean, this is a silly example, but I would like to be able to do this and just add a import statement, right? Which already Angular CLI can do it for me. That would be the ideal, but I cannot. Why? Because I have to react to those things, right? It's not the best, you see. And when I move it from here, I will have to clean up my component as well. I will have to clean up my properties and methods to event handlers. So you see, this is where things get complicated very fast. So let's look at the strategy that can be used in order to optimize that. So the real good place you want to be in is this. So you want to get rid of all those inputs as much as possible and make those components a little bit smarter. I mean, ideally smart components, but you can also think of them, like if you can reduce it at least to not output the change, and like they need to contain the state they manage, right? This is why they are in a separate module. You want to decrease the amounts of connections and increase cohesion inside your modules. Cohesion meaning they should own state that they deal with. So having a state properties in app component is never a good idea. So you want to get rid of all this and move it to appropriate components, and then create a way of communicating cross modules and not through app component. This is one of the biggest things you can do, right? So avoid that at all cost. Okay, because now you see I can cut that and move it anywhere I want on any page. I can keep it in app component. I can move it to another page. I can move it inside another component, and things will work because my connection points are very little. I only have this, right? That's it. And of course, there is an import thing that has to move around, but that's also very, very easy. All right, so reduce the inputs and reduce the state managing logic inside app component. That's one of the most important things. Okay, how to do it? All right, this should be pretty straightforward. You want to avoid app org like this, and don't put teams, don't put org name, don't put all of this. How can you do it? So let's just go to the org component, org dashboard. You see here,
one of the things is, you see, the problem with this component was that it was containing this, it knew about the teams. And of course, in every organizations have teams, that's pretty straightforward, but you also want to decouple that on the model level. I mean, technically, all I do here, in order to get that teams, I used to call the team service, you see, and since I am in an org module, I shouldn't know much about the teams, right? I mean, the teams should be in the teams module. This is why I have a separate module for this. So what can I do? Well, you can just get rid of it and then move this teams for loop. Actually, this is a very important detail. When you have for loops where you fetch the data from outside, it's worth creating a component just for that. But this component is going to be most likely a smart component. This is pretty important because smart components are containers. The reason why are they called containers is because they contain those for and if logics, right? Based on your data. So instead of having a reusable UI team section component, it's much better to create UI team sections component and then just have your service here. So you see, you remove it from the app and move it here, which means app is getting smaller, which is a good thing. And then you also extract the for loop logic into team sections. Okay, let's have a look. So team section was looking like this. And I could still keep the team sections, to be honest, but it was so like tiny that it didn't have much logic for me to keep it. So you see here, teams, I am in a team section, so I have a team service, pretty straightforward. And then I have to put the org name. This is one of the requirements. There are some ways to remove that coupling between teams and org, but it was not really a big deal. So this is how you do. You see, you move it here, and then you iterate over the reusable component, and then you also put a member lists, right? So things, and you only pass on the org name, which is sort of important to have it here. You could there are ways to do it. I mean, you cannot just use the ng template here. I mean, sorry, ng content, because you're in a for loop. It's always a problem actually. We're working inside for loops and passing on a proper context. So this is one way. And then UI member list, you need to provide a context, which is a partial of your team. And that leads me to another part. So when you go to the members list component, you see here you want to decrease those, and definitely you don't want to bubble up those events. You want to keep it even down, even deeper. And wherever this event fires, you want to react to it. And there is a pretty useful way to do it. Okay, so here I want to have my member service. You see, the member service was not existing before. This is why it's green. But I think it's one of the very useful way of actually thinking about your model. So instead of thinking that the team has the member, that's more like the view model, like a query model. But when you think about the data that you fetch from, external sources like APIs, think about decoupling this. Then you can provide the team ID, and then you can filter by team ID. This is a very useful and creates decoupling between the models, and you should do it. Avoid deeply nested models. I mean, you can create them in your states, you can create them in NGRX for your components, for your container components, but on the API level, try to avoid it. Try to keep it small as possible. Okay, and then in your members list, we don't have those couplings, which is pretty good. And then you also remove the inputs and of course the outputs. Okay, let's have a look inside. You can go to the card. You see, here things are a little bit better. So there is an interesting trick with how to avoid this can manage being pushed all the way through. But let's focus on the actually key part: how to communicate changes between the modules without the need of pushing inputs and outputs up and down the component tree. All right, so what you can do is to create an event bus. Event bus allows you to communicate what is the event bus. So look, instead of emitting event through output, you can emit it on event bus. And then let's have a look. Event bus is part of my core lib that I've created. So when you have a look at it here, it's like this. It's pretty much a very basic stuff. So you can emit stuff and you can listen. And this is a broadcast event bus, which means I don't have any filtering based on type. You can definitely do that. It's pretty easy. But the idea is simple. When you emit, you want to go for all listeners that has been subscribed. So this is really like add event listener. You've seen it in JavaScript many times. You need to provide a callback, right? And since it's a broadcast, it's going to broadcast on every event. And here you go. You just say, for every listener, just invoke the callback. And that's it. No RxJS, no signals. You don't need it at this level. And it's really easy to upgrade that to, micro frontends and stuff. All right. So who actually listens? Well, this is the event logs. So inside the event logs, you just can listen to broadcast event, and whenever event happens, you just output the event logs. You see, before you've been pushing that from the up level, right, through the event logs. But who should own event logs? Well, the event logs module. You shouldn't actually expose that outside. One of the very important things to do is actually control the amount of things being exposed from your modules. This is pretty important. Let me show you an example. In the Teams module, you see, this is a very common anti-pattern I see. People expose everything. They expose the data model, they expose the component, and they expose the service. You want to think about it in layers, right? So here is the sort of a data layer. It's a model. It's a glue between data layer and UI layer. Here's the UI layer and here's the data layer. You want to expose only the lower parts, the UI layer only. You want to avoid exposing these things. This is something you have to pay attention to. And here you see I'm only exposing the UI layer, which is the component. And I want to keep this private. It's encapsulation of my modules. It's very important. And then that's it. And then this is one of the tricks you can do. And then there is also the thing I told you, that to decouple the nested models. And then there is one more very interesting trick you can use, because when you remember the UI, I showed you that you can click that UI can manage. There is this component, right? You can see the link in the description to the full repo to this link. You can actually use it all as well to just have a look yourself. But check this out. So you see, it's nothing really fancy. It's just a checkbox. But what is important is that one way of decoupling your modules is to use event bus. But event bus is very useful to communicate in between the modules, okay? But what to do to encapsulate state inside the module when I want to communicate between maybe two components or two directives, because it's pretty useful. Then you can use states. You see, you can create the state, but when you have a look at here, you want to avoid exposing the state. You want to only expose UI layer. So this is directive, it's a UI layer, this is component, and this is component. But they communicate inside the module through the state. You don't expose the state. That's very important. You give like UI only components or UI only elements that you can use inside and compose your functionality. You don't want to expose the functionality, okay? So how it's done? So you see, you can use the UI can manage. That's one place. Then you can go to another module, let's say to here, and you can see, no, not here, in the member list. You can see even deeper. Here you go. You see, I have this visible on enabled. This is a directive I can add on an element. And because visible on like this directive, it actually works with the state. It can hide or show the element. I mean, the way how you do it is totally up to you. I just use one of the most basic ones. So check it out. You see, it's simple directive that uses the display block. And then it plugs into the state, which is private inside the module, and then it makes a decision. So if I wanna hide or show elements, I just apply the directive. It's, of course, it's coupling. It's one coupling point, but it's like super, super basic. It's just adding or removing HTML. So this is one of the ways, and the other one is the select, right? This is a little bit more complicated reason because I don't wanna put the remove button inside my members because it's not related. It's actually related to members, not related to roles. So yeah, so just to sum up, first of all, don't contain state inside app module. Second of all, use event bus to decouple the modules. Third, never expose internal details of your modules through a public API through the barrel file. Only try to go as low as possible, so expose only the UI layer. And fourth, in order to communicate between your UI elements, the directive pipes or components, use UI states that are private in the module. When you apply all those principles, you're going to create truly decoupled modules and truly reusable and composable UI. I hope you liked it.